You're on.
Okay, great. This tall plant right here with the berries and the kind of oval leaves and these very striking, like hot magenta stalks. This is pokeweed.
Okay.
Phytolacca americana, and the Americana kind of gives it away. This is a native plant. And the poke name supposedly comes from, if you look at the berries, each one has like a little, looks like a pincushion. Each one has a little poke in the bottom of it, like it's poked, and that's where the name comes from. At this stage, it's fantastic to identify this plant, but not to eat it. It's actually toxic at this stage.
Okay.
So in the spring, this will be coming up maybe like not more than a foot or so high, and they'll be thick, no pink. They'll be just like thick green spears that come up, almost look like asparagus. And at that stage, you just come in and you cut them back and you boil them. You do have to cook these. You boil them, and the texture is kind of like asparagus. The taste is totally different and very delicious, but hard to identify if you don't know them at that stage. So what you do is you find them at this stage when there's really nothing else out here that looks like this.
I see.
And then you come back to this spot in the spring and you go, oh, there's some fat asparagus looking things popping up.
I see.
That's the poke. At that stage, I also dig it up and I make medicine out of the root. And you have to be really careful with this one. And a lot of people say that it's poisonous. It's not actually poisonous, but it depends on the dosage, how much you take.
Okay.
I make a tincture by chopping up the root and covering it up with either apple cider vinegar or vodka, some kind of alcohol, and letting that sit for a month and then straining it out. And then that tincture, you just take like 5 drops of it, and it is, for my money, the best lymphatic herbal medicine out there. It's great for your entire lymph system. The reason you won't ever see that for sale is because of the low dosage. The average dose, like if you're taking echinacea or something, is like 25 to 50 drops, which is basically a squirt out of a dropper bottle.
Sure.
And if people did that with poke root, it would be way too much.
I see.
So you really need to safely identify it and then make your own if you want to use this plant. But it's a fantastic plant.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you.
Michael Pollan has a great...
Who is Michael
credo.
Pollan?
Okay. Michael Pollan wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma and a book called The Botany of Desire.
The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yeah.
Huh. See, I don't have a dilemma.
You don't? No dilemma. And he has a new one out, I think it's called Cooked or something like that, that just studies like the history of cooking techniques, starting from like a fire pit, on up, which is kind of fascinating. But Mark Pittman also has a couple of good ones out there. But they all sort of agree it's eat food, mostly plants, not too much.
Right.
And the catch is, how do you define food? And I'd say if you can't really pronounce the word on the label, that's not food.
So with you.
That's not
I'm
food.
so with you. I have 3 guidelines for people with my work. Is no artificial, because the time of study of artificial sweeteners, artificial additives hasn't been long enough for them to even
know.
test it in the span of one person's lifetime. And what they do with the testing is they amplify it by giving a larger dose to mice or rats or whatever animal it is that they're using to see the effect in. But it's not the same as having something in a smaller dosage over time as giving something
What is that going to do?
a large dose in a shorter period of time and then trying to extrapolate what may happen.
Yeah.
And also, yes, we're similar to animals. We have hearts, we have reproductive system, but we're not animals. I'm not a rat.
Right? You're not a cow with a stomach to digest the lawn.
Exactly.
Actually, like that plant that I was showing you earlier, the pokeweed, a lot of people think if you see like the birds and the squirrels eating it, it's safe for us. Birds eat those berries, but in quantity, they're toxic for humans. So that's not, they have different digestive systems. It's not the same.
Yes, they have different adaptations to environment. I mean, they, obviously, they can be outside when it's cold. You've got animals, huskies, that can do like 30 below. We can't do 30 below without some kind of a covering on us. So, I mean, those are obvious things that people overlook when they're doing it. And I also think that there's this thing that goes unspoken, that how dare you challenge a scientist because they have to know more than
Yeah.
you.
Well, that's
But don't abandon your own information.
Right.
Because 5 minutes from now, they'll reverse everything they've said.
Right.
This has happened so many times in my profession. When I first started, you weren't
absolutely.
allowed to train anybody with any back exercises. That was completely contraindicated.
Okay.
Which, of course, I did anyway. Yes, I'm saying that on camera. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
Right.
It was completely contraindicated. And so, of course, 4 years, 5 years later, they've created all these what I call bananas. You have people who are, the anterior musculature is overdeveloped, everything posterior is history. You're creating all these problems for people, and finally somebody's like, oh, I think we need a balance. Wow, really?
You see that with diet and nutrition all the time. It's like
Right.
all of a sudden, the low carb phase blows
right.
through, and then they're like, "Oh no, that's hard on your kidneys. Don't do that."
That's
and
right.
then the next one goes through, and
The carbohydrate also, I mean, those things I don't understand, because carbohydrate is what keeps your heart beating.
Yeah.
Carbohydrate is what is used for muscular contraction.
Right.
I think this thing, it comes from the I need to be skinny,
Yeah.
because we have an epidemic of people who are eating the wrong things. We have an epidemic of people who are having labor-saving devices. You have a car,
not-
you get
right.
more affluent, so you don't walk, you don't carry, you don't lift, you don't
Mm-hmm.
push, you don't pull as much. And so calorically, you don't expend as much, and so you become round,
Plus,
right? You become what you
plus
do.
you've got foods that, when I say historically, I don't mean that long ago, like middle of the last century. In my grandma's time or even my mom's, were not as easy to come by. So you like refined white sugar. If you had to make that at home, if I handed you some sugar cane and said go for it,
Right.
make some granulated sugar.
Sure.
Oh my God, you have to extract the juice. You have to dry it. You have to. It was if I
Only the rich, actually, only the affluent
Yeah.
had access to white sugar, and it was considered a status symbol. On your table, when you had white sugar, it was
Right.
considered to be like almost having electric lights. It was like two people
right
in New York who
special,
had it.
but it was special.
That's
it wasn't
right.
every day, and I
The
think
poorer people actually were eating better.
Yeah, and actually, this is, I mean, the fact that obesity is hitting poorer people more now is a complete, crazy flip
That is true.
on food and stuff. But you look at, like, if I want sweet from this landscape that we're looking at,
Okay.
I mean, of course, this is a park, but still, here
Right,
or
it's trees, it's
a landscape.
landscape,
Okay,
right.
so there are at least 4 different kinds of trees in the park that at the right time of year you can tap for syrup.
I didn't know that.
But you don't just get syrup out of the maple tree. You get sap out of the maple tree, and then you
Yes.
have to boil the sap.
Yes.
And by the time you actually have your little jug of maple syrup
it's
for
quite
the
a-
pancakes,
it's quite
you've
a-
burned a lot of calories making that.
That's true.
That maple syrup.
That's true.
If I feel like climbing up a tree and braving, the hive, the honey hive, I can bring down some honey to enjoy, but I have to climb the tree to get it. It's not just, somebody handing me a soda and saying, here.
That's right.
So yeah, I think it's that combination of this rich food plus less exercise. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Everyone knows that, but they don't realize how new that is historically.
Sure.
That's
A lot of things are new because we're going more from exporting manual jobs to even people who are not necessarily on the higher end of the workforce. Their jobs do not require as much physical labor as before. It used to be much more intense physically. Now things are relegated to computer. Things are already, remember the times when I used to take a camera or whatever device it was I'd buy. If there was a problem with it, you took it to a shop and they fixed it. Now, we replaced that. The
Yeah.
entire unit,
Right.
without even thinking about it. We're not even thinking about it breaking up
Yeah.
into components because the components aren't even made here. The device isn't even
yeah.
assembled here for the most part. So everything has become totally different.
There's also I can remember with my dad's Volkswagen, and if something went wrong, you got the manual out of the glove compartment and you open up the hood and you fixed it. You can't even really do that with
No.
cars nowadays.
Things are computerized.
And same thing, with the computer or whatever. And don't get me wrong, I love my computer, but and I make my living writing
Sure.
on the computer. But if I have to fix it, I have to take it to an expert. It's not something I can
Absolutely.
that I can do. It's one, which is fine, and you're an expert in your field, I'm an expert in my field, and I'm not anti-expert, but I do think that there's a level of self-trust and just common sense that comes into the food world. Like you were saying, people just don't always pay attention. I've had people bring their kids on a tour with me, on a foraging tour, and we find some blackberries, like if it's peak blackberry season, and they've
Which is some of my favorite. I know where a lot of, don't tell anybody, because I know where a lot of trees are right now here.
All right, I'm not telling. And I'll start picking the blackberries, and I show them how to tell this is a blackberry, and the parents won't let me give them to the kids. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you paid me to come on my tour because I'm an expert.
To show you what the kids can
eat. Right? And now you're not going to let, but you'll go to the supermarket.
That's right.
And you will pay money for something a stranger packed in plastic 3,000 miles away, and you trust them more than you trust me standing in front of you saying this is okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that I think is scary, actually. I mean, the statistic I found researching one of my books, it was just like, wow, okay. If the trucks couldn't get in, if basically the supply lines for New York City were closed, counting just what's in food stores and restaurants, we have 2 days worth of food.
That sounds about right.
That's it. Now, they're not counting foraging in the park, so if that happens, you come find me.
If that happens, we're going to see each other, because I'm going to be here already.
Exactly, because I'll be doing just fine. But
you and me both.
Yeah.
You and me both. But I think that there's a mechanism out there that the marketing mechanisms of the commercial world, and I'm going to say that is the entire commercial world, fitness, wellness, food, all of it included, they have a different agenda. And their agenda is to sell product. And the way they manipulate people is without conscience. They're not looking at what's best for you. They're looking at what's best for their bottom line. And now we've had a culture of it. And we've moved away from self-reliance. We've moved away from creativity. Because when you're doing things in the wild, which, I like to go out in the wild, and we go out and we camp and we do things, you have to troubleshoot.
Right.
You have to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
You're 2 days out and you forgot something, you got to make it happen.
Right.
We were out 3 days on the river. The filter gets clogged up. The water filter gets clogged up because there was so much iron in the water, red clay. Couldn't clean it. Couldn't get the water. So what are you going to do? Not drink water? Roll back 3 days? You boy.